We are Ana, Sofia, Carmina, Alejandra, and Maria, and we are going to talk about if rent prices controls are efficient or not.
Renting is an alternative to home ownership. It shapes the outcome of the housing market. As a result, rental market regulations have relevant dimensions due to its impact on the housing market. This is why policymakers must develop a sizable private rental market for it to be an attenuating factor of housing prices. Due to the increase in demand, there has been an establishment of a law, known as rent control, that established a maximum price on what landlords may charge tenants. Rent control acts as a price ceiling by preventing rents either from being charged above a certain level or from increasing at a rate higher than a predetermined percentage. Rent control is also known as the War Emergency Tenant Protection Act, which is defended by the New York legislators as a way of protecting tenants from war-related housing shortages. Rent control started in New York. Therefore, if rents are established at less than their equilibrium levels, the quantity demanded will necessarily exceed the amount supplied, and rent control will lead to a lack of dwelling spaces. In a competitive market and absent controls on prices, if the amount of commodity or service demanded is larger than the amount supplied, prices rise to eliminate the shortage by bringing new supply and by reducing the amount demanded. But controls prevent rents from attaining market clearing levels and shortage result. Rent control causes shortages, diminution in the quality of the product and queues. But because of the law places sitting tenants first in the queue, many of them benefit.
Putting the maximum price, the houses are cheaper, since if they were governed by the offer and the demand, it would be triple of expensive, since there is a lot of demand and a little supply. The main advantage highlighted by experts in establishing a reference index for rental prices is to provide transparency to the market, both for tenants and landlords. In the absence of rent control, an increase in leases would encourage the construction of new buildings in the long term, adjusting their availability to the highest demand. With rent control, the probability of building new houses diminishes, and therefore discourages such activity. The last way in which rent control reduces the supply of leases in the short term is by encouraging the sale of dwellings that were formerly rented. Finally, certain forms of rent control eliminate the advantages that owners are willing to offer to long-term tenants.
The Catalan administrations are thinking about limiting the price of rent to avoid a new immobiliary bubble. The mayors of the city, Ada Colau, asked the central government to approve the petition for the limitations of the rent prices, and the full of Barcelona's town hall approved it. The majority of parties voted in favor, except PP and Ciutadans, for which it wasn't applied. The government has created a rent reference index in Catalonia with the aim of providing transparency in the rental market and to modulate the disproportionate increases in rents that have occurred in recent months in some cities of Catalonia. The index will be applied to 27 municipalities, which represent almost 60% of the population of Catalonia.
The index is an indicator of public consultation with informative nature that allows to know and estimate average price of rental of a house per square meter. With the index, administrations will have a new tool to encourage the rental market and to develop public housing policies. In the coming months, the government will establish measures to include incentives to owners who rent their home below the rate of reference. It will also regulate the obligation to include in the offers and rental contracts if the price is within the parameters of the reference index. RIN has an index that recommends a price per square meter taking into account the surface of the house, its state and the age of the building. It's not binding, but judges take it into account when a tenant reports an abusive increase from its lessor. German Civil Code considers that increasing the rental price more than 50% is usury, and it has to be around 10% of prices of similar flats. Paris' ALU law is applied since 2015. This wants to stop the rise in the rental price. It establishes that rental price cannot be exceeded by more than 20% of what is established in the rent reference index. If this happens, the case may end in the courts. The houses are classified by the number of rooms, the location, and the year of construction.
This statistic measures rent control in European cities, with indicators constructed according to the total proportion. We can see that Sweden leads governmental regulation in rent, followed by Luxembourg, Denmark, Austria, and Germany. Around 50% of people rent their housing in Germany. Almost 90% of all Berliners do. German regulation makes it illegal to charge rent more than 20% above the level charged for a comparable property. Still, the outcome of rent regulation is not always a fairer market. An example is this statistic that shows annual rental yield for residential property. Rental yields are the rates of income return over the cost associated with an investment property. So, a conclusion would be that Germany has very low annual rental yields due to price control. But why does this happen? If there is price control in rent, a lot of people are willing to rent. This is an increase in the demand. So there is less incentive to compete between landlords to attract tenants. As a result, landlords who do not rent their properties don't bother to maintain them and are less keen to offer renting households. This is a reduction in the supply. What does this actually mean? Restrictive price ceilings reduce the supply of property to the market. So, what should be a better solution over the abuse of rent control when demand is increasing? Well, we suggest that a more effective policy is to simply build more housing. As a result, there is never too much offer for so little demand, as demand increases exponentially.